Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Zoom room and welcome to the launch of the new documentary film Ihamba. It seems that everyone here had the chance to just watch the premiere, which is very exciting. That was the first time this film has streamed live publicly on YouTube. It's been shared in a few different fora thus far within Uganda and in some film festivals around the world. But we're so happy to finally have the film out and available publicly for the world to watch now. And we're really grateful that you could all be here with us to celebrate the premiere. My name is Erin Drage. I'm one of the co-directors of the documentary film. I'm here with our other co-director, David Borish, who you heard from earlier and you'll hear from again shortly. And today we're going to walk through a bit of a behind the scenes peek into the making of this documentary film. And we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers near the end of our webinar here. So you should see a question and answer function in the Zoom room here. Feel free to start dropping your questions about the film in that question and answer box. If you don't see it at the bottom bar of the Zoom link, you should be able to find it under the three dots that say more. So feel free to add questions in there as we go, and we'll get to those shortly. But to start us off, I just wanted to take a quick moment to recognize that today I'm joining this webinar from the traditional homelands of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And we invite you all to take a moment to consider the Indigenous lands that you are each joining from and to honor the original stewards of the lands and waters in your area. Because, like many Indigenous peoples around the world, the Batwa, whose film we just watched, are deeply connected to their ancestral homelands. And you got to get a small glimpse of that in the documentary film. And it's helpful for us all to remember and consider the homelands that we are on. And so now that you've watched the documentary film, we're going to spend the next hour or so giving you a bit of a behind the scenes and taking this opportunity for some questions and answers near the end. And before we dive into all of the behind the scenes, I'd love to introduce a little bit of the team. If you can go to the next slide, David. So this documentary film was only made possible through the help of an incredibly large team of folks around the world who brought this project to life. In fact, this documentary film builds on over 15 years of academic partnerships between Canadian and Ugandan researchers who have all been working towards justice for Batwa and for Indigenous peoples affected by this eviction from Bwindi National Park. On screen, you see a small sampling of the team who made this project possible, all working towards this goal of amplifying Batwa voices and in sharing the story of Batwa and advancing cultural and environmental justice. So I'll be sharing a bit more about the team and the co-creation process of the film shortly, but just know that it was an incredible effort by many, many people around the world to bring this story to life. David, I'll pass it over to you with that.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And as mentioned, a whole lot of people involved in the making of this work. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to run these Zoom events with Batwa communities. Very limited access to phones, computers, even electricity. With that said, we did do some pre-recordings with a few key voices from this team. So those will be kind of interwoven throughout. And we'll start actually very shortly with hearing from Sylvia Kukunda, who's going to be sharing a bit more about the context about the eviction and Batwa in general. But just to preface before that, the Ihamba film was focused within and around Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, so in this southwestern portion of Uganda. And what you're seeing on this map, those triangles are the Batwa communities that were involved in this project, who now reside in the Kanungu district. But it's important to recognize also that Batwa lived in other forested areas across this region in places that are now national parks or reserves. And so there's a much more complicated story and broader story of Batwa and forests in this region. But for this specific project, we really only focused on Batwa voices from the Kanungu region in the kind of northwestern portion of Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. So with that, I'm going to pass it on now to Sylvia's recording for her to share a bit more about the context of the eviction.
Kokunda Sylvia from the Batwa community, and I was born in Bikuto, Batwa settlement. I was born after the Batwa eviction. I work with Action for Batwa Empowerment Group, which is an organization that was started to advocate for the Batwa rights after realizing many injustices that the Batwa are going through. The Batwa, the history of Batwa, these are people that lived in the forests of Mugahinga, Bwindi, Semurika and Echuya forests for many years. And this forest sustained the Batwa for many years, for their lifetime. So when time reached around 1990s, the government of Uganda wanted to conserve these forests because they thought maybe people were destroying the forest, the Batwa were destroying the forest, which was not the case. And now they wanted to conserve the forest and endangered mountain gorillas. They evicted these people that lived in these forests for many years. So after evicting the Batwa people, we were evicted without free, prior and informed consent. We were not compensated at all, and we started living at the edges of the forest. Life was not easy for us, for our elders, because we faced a lot of discrimination from the communities where we had gone. Then these forests, we were displaced from different communities or different districts. Like some of the Batwa who lived in Semuriki, they went to Bundubujo, they are living there. And some of the Batwa who lived in Bwindi forest, they are in Kanungu districts. And the others are in Kabare. Then those ones who lived in Echuya forest, they went to Kisoro. So that is how many people, the Batwa are in different districts in Kanungu, in Uganda, because we are displaced in different places. And we even lost family ties because some of our relatives went in other places. And indeed we have continued to be squatters on these people's lands, because even where we are staying, we are not rest assured that this is our land. We don't have any ownership. People buy, or NGOs buy the lands and then say, you come and stay here. They just tell you to sit. They don't guarantee you that this is your place. So we always live still with this fear that maybe one day, one time, we will also be evicted from the places where we are staying. We have tried to carry stakeholders meetings, to engage meetings with many stakeholders, both local and national. And I have also tried to move in different countries, trying to speak on different platforms on the Batwa injustices. However much, some of our voice is not being heard. If this film is shared widely, it can as well be used as an advocacy tool for the government and for people to know that the Batwa have no home, they have nowhere to stay because they were evicted out of their forest. And if there are other people that can be able to speak to the government, at least they can reach out to the government to make sure that the Batwa can have access to their forest again, to their ancestral home again.
Excellent. Yeah, we're really happy to have had Sylvia contribute so much to this film. And unfortunately, though she couldn't be here live today, she wanted to share some of her thoughts with you about this situation. And as you just heard Sylvia share, she's been advocating for Batwa rights and for justice, but there's generally been a lack of opportunity for Batwa voices to be heard, especially in international fora, as the Batwa are a very small minority Indigenous group in Uganda, and they continue to endure tremendous difficulties and injustices following their eviction from the forest. And this film was born as a response to these injustices, really to create a Batwa led storytelling process that created space for Batwa to share their story on their terms. The story of the Batwa eviction has been covered by various journalists and has been researched a little bit over the years, but Batwa have rarely been in the driver's seat, being the ones to share their own story. And that was a really important priority for this project, and one that the Batwa have been calling for a very long time. So from the beginning, a fully led Batwa process for this film was the goal, and there were tremendous efforts made to make this possible. But as you can imagine, in practice, this is quite difficult given the barriers that come with working across multiple languages and within communities facing extreme poverty, including limited electricity and connectivity, as David mentioned, and extreme food insecurity in some cases. But the whole team, including the Batwa team members, worked extremely hard to facilitate an environment where Batwa themselves guided the work and to ensure that the resources available for this project were equitably distributed and directed by Batwa community members themselves. Next slide. A big part of that was the establishment of an advisory committee comprised of 8 Batwa community members who were formed from a grassroots effort. And this was really one of the grounding components of the co-creation process for this project. This Batwa Advisory Committee was established very early on in the project, well before any filming began. And the advisory committee represented most of the Kanungu district Batwa villages. So it was really meant to be a collective voice to guide the project from the beginning. And they really were central in guiding the work at a conceptual level. And they met regularly for over 2 years to shape the priority themes, the messaging, and the vision for this film. They served kind of as the anchor for the filmmaking and the research process for this project, and they guided the process really from those very earliest stages of conceptualization through to film production and seeing post-production through all the way to now to the launch of this film. And next slide. Before doing any filming for the project, though, we also organized focus group style meetings across the Kanungu district, engaging with over 100 Batwa community members across these villages who shared their priorities for the film as well. And these conversations were extremely helpful in ensuring that the film reflected priorities and perspectives from the broader Batwa communities beyond the advisory committee, and that the themes and the stories that emerged from these meetings eventually went on to be the foundation for everything that followed in this work. Next slide. And throughout this process, a major priority that we heard over and over from the Batwa Advisory Committee and from community members was that the film should create tangible employment opportunities and training opportunities, especially for Batwa youth. We heard that too often outsiders and projects like this come into Batwa communities without making space for Batwa to lead or directly benefit from this kind of work. So, a big priority from the outset was to hire Batwa research assistants and interns who were embedded within the filmmaking process and the distribution of the film. They've been sharing the film as well throughout the Kanungu region. And throughout this process, the hope was really to gain hands-on experience and skills that extend well beyond the short-term project development for the film. And so Edward, who you saw in the documentary film, he was hired early on to both participate in the work as a character in the film and also to support the interviewing, translation, and really have hands on experience throughout the whole filmmaking process. And again, he unfortunately couldn't be here at the launch with us live today, but he did record a video to share with all of you. So we can play that next.
Hey everyone, I'm by names of Jalwanga Edward, a Mutabai tribe. I come from Chihembe Batwa settlement and I work with EVC and at the same time BDP. So I'm here share with you my experience when I was doing the interviews during the Ihamba Batwa film project. In my experience, I learned how to interview, where I learned how to ask some questions to the Batwa people, and in that, I learned how to use some machines. For example, the cameras, the computers, and how to use them. Where I could use them in recording, in getting the videos. So that's the experience I learned in that interviews. Next, I learned how to speak English because before this interview or before this film project, I couldn't speak good English. But now I speak the fluent English, where I would translate. You find where I was translating from the Runyankole language to English language, and from the English language to Runyankole language. Then also, next, I learned how to speak in the audience of the people because I couldn't stand in front of people. Then I speak to them, sing them. I could fear, but because of this film project, I learned how to stand in front of people and speak. So therefore, I appreciate David, Erin, and Sebastian, who included me in making this film project and doing some research about the Batwa and Ihamba project. So I thank you very much, and I appreciate, and I say thank you for watching this video. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Edward, for sharing that. And just building more on this, so it was seen as a priority to be documenting community knowledge through these interviews about their relationship with the forest. But it was also a priority to show this relationship that Batwa have with the forest. And so we recognized early on that it was going to be really important to have some filming done within the forest itself. But of course, this is a challenge in the Kanungu district where Batwa don't have this freedom of access with the forest. And so we were trying to figure out the best way to do this and essentially landed on going with some park rangers on a guided forest walk. This is typically something that tourists would do. They might go gorilla trekking one day and then might go on a forest walk another day. But this was the most feasible way for us to go into the park. And so in the top left photo, you can see one of the park rangers accompanying us. But this was really quite an interesting day because there were a mix of Batwa Advisory Committee members who were there, as well as other community members who were born in the forest and hadn't been back in many, many years. And in Edward's case, this was actually his very first time within the forest. And so it was quite an emotional day and just filled with lots of excitement as well. We were able to document, as you saw in the film, some of their knowledge and connection to the plants and the forest, but there's so much more that they shared with us, talking about different plants that are used to cure different illnesses, how women gave birth in the forest, how people navigated the forest. In the bottom right, you can see some of the ways that they used to sleep in the forest. So it really was just a little glimpse into the depth of knowledge that these people have of this forest, even though they haven't been back in so long. But do just want to emphasize again that this was just one day, and after we left this guided walk, it was kind of back to reality for these people where they aren't allowed back into the forest. So after the filming took place and after we worked on a draft version of the film, it was really important to get feedback from as many Batwa community members as we could. And so the draft film was screened in all participating communities where people could share their thoughts and reflections and feedback. And this really helped us to tweak and adjust the film to meet these interests and needs. And one of the things that came up quite a bit through this feedback process was just how important it was to visualize and communicate Batwa dance and music. This is something that holds a lot of pride amongst these communities. And so what we ended up doing was working with a team of African composers and music sound specialists to bring in the Batwa music and sounds more directly into the film. And just to share a little glimpse into how this worked in practice, I'm going to share two clips. The next one is just the raw music that was captured. And then following that is how that clip was integrated into the film. So hopefully everyone can hear this next clip okay. So that was the raw clip, and now this is how we brought it into the film.
Tukaba tubaga twine mbwenu twine mukaba abatwa bo mururu umutwa yine ko mururu hati umutwa yaba yine mururu yaba yine ke bihama byeye binankire mbwenu byoti zatare ngo abana babige hata sigira bagiye ata mukire ati bijako ngisabe kureba. Sabo was it jaune?
Present one, sometimes the actually mucho procura.
So hopefully that gives you just a little taste of how some of the Batwa sounds and music was woven into the film. So after the film was completed, we then moved into the dissemination phase, and this event right here is the first international screening of Ihamba. But over the past year, we've been prioritizing local dissemination. And just to give a few examples of this, the top photo is one of the first screenings that was done with non-Batwa Ugandans in the region. So this included conservation authorities, the local mayor, health policy staff, a mix of different people. What you're seeing there is the Batwa Advisory Committee introducing themselves ahead of the film screening. The bottom photo, you can see Edward is speaking in front of a group of students and professors. This was at Makerere University in Kampala, so a screening for more of an academic audience. One thing that I want to emphasize as well is that over the past year, we've been working with Sylvia and her organization, Action for Batwa Empowerment Group, who have been in these early stages of building more of a relationship with the park. And the reason why the Ihamba film fits in here is that the park has agreed to have the Ihamba film screened to tourists before they enter the park. And so these photos here, you can see one of the Batwa youth who works with Sylvia's organization. His name's Emmanuel, and he's presenting the Ihamba film in front of a group of tourists before they go gorilla trekking. So we hope that the film will continue to be used locally in these kinds of ways. And then last thing before passing it back to Aaron is while this project is primarily a film project, there's also a research dimension to it. We ended up talking with more than 40 people across the 10 Batwa settlements in Kanungu district, and only a small portion of them were highlighted in the film. But there's a whole wealth of knowledge about the eviction, about their relationships with the forest, about adaptation, about well-being, about many different concepts. And so we're in the early stages right now of using the video interviews as essentially qualitative knowledge to organize and analyze and hopefully the research outputs from this will contribute towards this work as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to Aaron.
Great. So hopefully you've all gathered from this presentation at this point that this project has really been rooted in a belief in the importance of Indigenous people sharing their voices and their stories on their own terms. And this film is really a representation of that in a big way. And it took many years of partnership and trust building and work to bring it to life. But we really do believe in the final product that this is something meaningful, not only because of the film and what story it shares, but because of the process that went into it. And we're really happy to get to share a little bit of that process with you all today. And as we wrap up this portion of the launch, this kind of little presentation, we really do invite you to learn more about Batwa-led organizations and initiatives that are happening in the Kanungu region of Uganda and to consider how you might engage with and support this work. More concretely, some steps might include amplifying Batwa voices and stories, for example, by sharing this documentary film. The YouTube link that you all watched the premiere on is now where the film lives full time. It's now available publicly, and we would encourage you to share it widely with your networks. But also, there are opportunities to donate directly to Batwa led efforts. There is a real need for resources for Batwa to work through the injustices that their communities are still facing. And in general, we invite you all to advocate within your own networks and institutions for land rights and self-determination of Indigenous peoples in conservation contexts and beyond. It's a really important issue, as I'm sure you all know, and you got to see a little bit of the firsthand reasons for why. And so in the Kanungu district in particular, and in the case of the Batwa in particular, we encourage you to check out Sylvia's organization that's been mentioned, the Action for Batwa Empowerment Group. That this organization, ABAG, as the acronym is, we partnered with ABAG on the film distribution, and their organization, they're doing really incredible work on Batwa-led justice initiatives and youth training. And we can drop the link for ABAG in the chat. And the film project website also links her organization where you can support directly, which is a really meaningful outcome of this work. And next slide. So with that, we're really excited to move into the questions and answers. I know we've had some questions coming through, and we very much welcome other questions from all of you. Just a reminder, the question and answer function in Zoom is enabled, so you can find that in the bottom black bar on the Zoom room. If you don't see it right away, it might be under the More button with the 3 little dots. So please do feel free to ask us questions about the film itself, about the filmmaking process, about the dissemination. I mean, it's quite a rich project, and we would be very happy to engage in conversation with you all about it here. And so joining us for this Q&A period are 2 of our other project team members. So I'd love to introduce Dr. Sherry Lee Harper from the University of Alberta, who will be joining us for the Q&A, and Dr. Didakus Namanya from the Uganda Ministry of Health, who has been really critical in bringing this project to life and working on Batwa health and well-being initiatives for the last several decades. So we're really lucky to have both of them in the room with us. So with that, I will pass it over to Sherry to facilitate the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was a really great past hour. It's so fun to see the film screened and have it live. And it was really great to see the behind the scenes information that you just presented. And so now we're turning it over to all of you to ask us questions. So please feel free to pop in your questions in the Q&A box, as Erin had mentioned. But let's dive right in. There's one question, there's lots of questions popping up. So I'm going to try and group some of them together. But let's start with this question about how long the Batwa were able to be in the forest for the project. And I think you touched on that a little bit already, but maybe you could expand on it. And the second part of that question is, are there talks of being able to repeat that trip on a more regular basis or to involve Batwa more in the forest management? Didas, why don't I turn it over to you first to try and answer that question? How can the Batwa re-enter the forest, or what are possibilities there?
Well, I first of all want to say thank you to the whole team for this wonderful film, which is going to work as an advocacy tool, not only for the Batwa, but also for us, the researchers. I must mention that we are continuing to do research, as you may be aware, on food systems, on health systems, on climate change. So this is a very important tool for us to move forward, doing our studies and introducing the topics that we want to do, focus group discussions, key informant interviews. It is a critical icebreaker, if I may mention it like that. Now, back to the question, Sherry and the whole team. I think the better question touches on global indigenous, aboriginal issues regarding the governments and the politics of the different countries. And therefore, it is not a question that can be answered in 1 year, in 2 years. It's a question that I think is a process, ongoing process. And I'm impressed by the fact that we have already made some good steps. Entering the park was a big step, in my view. It is mentioned that it is after so many years that the Batwa were not able to enter the forest officially. I can say that we can continue discussing, taking this conversation, showing the film, and having more discussions with the administration, with the authorities. I think it is possible that they can systematically allow. I'm saying it can be possible. I'm not sure when it can happen, but I want to be positive and say that let's continue the discussions with the Batwa organizations, ABEG, BDP, and the local authorities. Let's continue the conversation. And this film is one of the opportunities that we have to continue with this discussion. Thank you. And over to you, Sherry.
Thank you so much. That's a really helpful answer. And maybe David and Aaron, do you want to provide any further reflection on this question, in particular, the time that you spent during this project in the forest with the Batwa?
I didn't get that, Sherry.
Oh, sorry. I'll just repeat that. I was just saying thank you so much for your response. That was really helpful. And now I'd love to turn it over to David and Aaron to share their reflections. David, over to you first, and then we'll turn it to Aaron.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more to what ABEG is doing, so Sylvia's organization, to that point of whether Batwa can hopefully enter the forest in a more long-term way. They're really trying to find ways of supporting kind of Batwa leadership in organizing these kind of trail access or just trail access for cultural purposes. So I don't want to speak too much about it because it's still very early stages, but there are initiatives going on right now to really try to have Batwa more involved in the conservation, but also for their own cultural purposes. And what we did for that one day was just, one small drop in the bucket to help support that. But ideally, this will be something that can be a more long-term initiative as well. I'll pass it on now to Aaron in case you have anything else to add.
Sure. I will just add it's phenomenal seeing the kind of leadership that Sylvia and other Batwa leaders in the region have taken in advocating for their rights, for their access to their ancestral territories. And it's it's really problematic how much work needs to go into regaining access to their traditional territories, but it's a fight that's ongoing. And just to maybe tie it to broader international trends, maybe some of you have heard in the room the term fortress conservation, this concept of protected areas and parks being protected in a way that really separates humans from nature and really divides our relationship with the natural world. And this concept of fencing off nature and separating it from humans is one that has often been approached with good intentions of saving the natural world and of trying to protect ecosystems that are at risk. But there are these much bigger and broader trends. I know some of you all on the call here today are from the conservation community, and there are broader trends at the international scale about recognizing the need for all nature conservation and protected areas projects to be embedded within a framework of human rights first and foremost, and making sure that there are always human rights at the foundation of these environmental conservation projects. And I guess I would just comment that the Batwa resistance movement and fight for their rights in this case is a reflection of a trend that's happening in many parts of the world to make sure that Indigenous peoples are not forced out of their territories and are allowed to maintain their relationships with their ancestral territories in ways that are appropriate and also allow for the sustainable management and conservation of these natural environments. So it is a really big conversation that's happening in international conservation fora right now. And it's very admirable seeing the ways that the Batwa are working on this very locally in their context. And I encourage all of us to consider, what it means to have rights-based conservation more broadly around the world. Sherry, back over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron. There was a comment that was shared in the chat with us, and so I thought I'd read the comment and then ask for the panelist reflection on it. So here's the comment. The fundamental rights of Indigenous peoples are often misrepresented when other people speak for them, as is often the case. This person's going to endeavor to promote the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples in all matters likely to affect their lives. So I was wondering if you could just reflect on maybe the role of a film like this in helping to do that and self-determination in storytelling. Maybe Aaron, I'll start with you this time and then turn it to Didas and end with David. Aaron, go ahead.
Great. Yeah. So the role of film in self-determination, this was a conversation that we had for the better part of a year going into this filmmaking process. And it's something we considered very delicately and talked about very intentionally as a team of Batwa and non-Batwa filmmakers and researchers and storytellers. And I think where we landed and part of the strength that we found in the filmmaking process is that, David and I were able to bring our more tangible techie film skills and our cameras and our equipment to a project like this to support in the storytelling and the sharing process. And we can use our technology to help document, but in a world that is so narrative driven, where we as humans, we connect with each other through stories so often, film from our whole team's perspective, I think provides this incredible opportunity to both share through words, but also, as David showed in that presentation, share through music, share through visuals, what the experience of a collective community is with a very wide audience. And there's something really powerful about the written word and written stories. But as I think you've all just seen through this film that you watched, there's something very powerful too about seeing the emotion on somebody's face when they have access to the forest for the first time in 30 years and getting to watch the interactions between people on screen and how a story like this comes to life in a film process is incredibly special. And I think I'll just finish with the marginalization of Indigenous people's voices that we have been talking about throughout this presentation process is a pervasive problem, a major problem, a challenge that can only be overcome by intentionally creating space for Batwa to share their own voices, for Indigenous peoples to share their own voices. And when Indigenous people are put in the driver's seat of projects like this and are able to shape the narrative themselves and share through a process like a film and the filmmaking experience, the process, it allows for some of the most powerful, I think, forms for really large scale change because you can hear directly from the people whose story is being shared. And that is something that film is I think very uniquely positioned to do. I'm sure the others have thoughts on this as well, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Aaron. Didas, over to you.
I will add on what has been said already, that indeed films, videos, photographs are very critical, are very important and powerful tools of communicating. And more so if they are being led by the people affected themselves, in this case, the Batwa, Indigenous people. So I want to say that you may remember, Sherry, that we have used this in the past, especially photo voice, which we used in the first part several years back, about 15 years ago when we interacted with the Batwa, and we published some articles about this involving the Batwa themselves taking pictures and showing their experiences, their lived experiences. So I am in support of this approach to research and sharing experiences with the people that are affected in advocating and raising their voices. So this film, this video is going to work very much for us as we continue to do research. Many Batwa these days, some of them own smartphones, I think they can view it on their smartphones, which is bringing the information to the local situation. Most of them may not be able to view this on YouTube in Zoom, but going forward, they can be able to view it and use it for their advocacy. That's what I can say. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you. David, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think a lot of it's already been shared, and I appreciate both Aaron and Dita sharing these thoughts. I guess I'll just add a little bit that I think when it comes to this representation of Indigenous knowledge and experiences, there's different ways of doing that, and research is one path, and there's other paths that many of these communities have tried to take as well. But I guess what film can really help is share that embodied experience, and try as closely as possible to put viewers in the shoes of those who are speaking and those who are on screen. And it's not perfect. There's still a lot of gaps and issues with film, but I think the idea of really trying to get a look into someone's life or a community's experience is partly why we pursued this film initiative in the first place. And as Sylvia briefly shared in her piece as well, a lot of Batwa voices have not been heard, and this is a common theme I think amongst many Indigenous groups worldwide as they're trying to share their experiences and their relationships with nature and things like that. And one of we talked quite a bit with the Batwa Advisory Committee as well as others around, what is the core like goal of this film? What is the intended impact from this? And there's so many different complicated issues relating to this particular story. But one of the things that we heard from them is that they wanted to share their experience with other Ugandans as well, those who are not Indigenous. And so there was kind of a theme of trying to build empathy that we really tried to focus on, of just humanizing people, letting people learn a little bit more about what it's like to be Batwa, to have this connection with the forest. And we hope that will, support in some small way. So yeah, those are just a few thoughts on the film and representation.
Okay, thanks so much, David. And so I'm seeing a cluster of questions coming in that's really asking about questions from a legal perspective. So, what are the legal options for Batwa? What's happening from a legal perspective? So, for example, one person has asked, are there any ongoing legal processes for redistribution? And another person asked a question comparing the situation in Uganda to DRC. The question reads, in 2024, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights ruled that the government of the DRC violated the rights of Indigenous Batwa by evicting them from their ancestral lands. I wonder whether the legal precedent can support the Batwa people in Uganda in their advocacy for their rights. So, who would like to approach this question first? The legal implications of what's happened for Batwa.
I can
Go ahead.
quickly chime in if that's okay. And then Ditas, I'll pass it to you to, I'm sure, add a little more context. But essentially, this has been taken to the courts in Uganda as a human rights violation. The eviction from the forest has been argued to be a major human rights abuse, essentially. And in 2021, the Constitutional Court in Uganda ruled in favor of the Batwa, and it was considered a landmark, majorly positive decision for Batwa. It was a big win, if you will, in the legal status of Batwa fight for land rights and for access to their ancestral territories. The government of Uganda appealed that decision, and it has now been sitting with the Uganda Supreme Court since the summer of 2021, and there's been no additional ruling since then. So, as you can imagine, that's now coming up on 5 years that the appeal remains pending. which causes a standstill in the implementation of that historic 2021 ruling in favor of the Batwa. So it's one of these very complex and difficult and political situations where the Batwa are still waiting for word from the Supreme Court as to what happens next. But there is a lot of hope that the courts could deliver a requirement for some kind of compensation or land access or restitution of some kind for the wrongs that were committed against the Batwa. And there have been a number of international organizations that have been supporting Batwa in their pursuits of justice through the legal system over the years. Didas, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you have said it all, but I could add that legal issues relating to land and associated with big, like the national park and the indigenous people are very complex and very sensitive, I may say. And so, but the landmark decision by the courts to give the rights to the Batwa is very fundamental in my opinion. What I can comment, and this is my opinion, is that I would support the compensation and regulated access to the Batwa to the forests because these are their ancestral territories. They have a lot of attachment to these forests, and so a regulated, access which combines a combination of tourism and protection of the gorillas would be, I don't know, I'm not privy to the ruling of the courts, but I would propose such kind of, compensation and access to the forest. The Batwa need to go back to, in some way, and access some of the herbs, some of the forest products, so that they're able to, live part of their ancestral life. That would be my quick comment about this. Thank you. And over to you, Sherry.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to turn it. So this was a part of a research project too, and there is a few questions asking about research type questions. So the first question is about how momentum was sustained during the process, and now that the active, how do you sustain momentum now that the active part of the project is over? What are some hurdles that the team had to work around that were unexpected during both filmmaking and research data collection? And there's also a question about funding, about research funders. So can you explain how the project was funded? Would you go through the same funding agency next time or look elsewhere? Can you explain why you would change that or if you would change that? So yeah, maybe some comments on how this film united film with research, some of your reflections on that, some of your reflections on the funding. Who would like to go first? Maybe David, you didn't get a chance to answer in the last round, so I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah, no, thanks for that question. I guess just on the point of maybe some of the overarching idea of this project being both research and film, with our team, we really see these things as tied together, because when you're doing qualitative research, you're going out and documenting people's experiences and perspectives, and that's very much in line with the way that making a documentary film works as well. And so from the early stages of this work, the idea was to work towards both the kind of qualitative research pieces as well as the documentary film pieces. But of course, doing this has a lot of different challenges. In general, it just, it takes time to do a film properly and put the effort into the kind of pre-production phase and really thinking through what is the goal, what is the impact we're trying to have, and added on top of that just the technical challenges for communicating with these communities. It was really, really difficult to kind of keep that communication going but we were able to manage through working with local partners by having these Batwa Advisory Committee meetings happen on a regular basis. And there's a reason why this took, multiple years to do is we needed that time to really get the themes and the ideas and the research questions kind of down. So yeah, I guess that's a bit on the kind of research film side, the general technical challenges as well, and then maybe just high level on the funding aspect. So we were lucky to be working with the AirMat project, which is this I guess international research initiative that's really about trying to explore and support Indigenous connections to nature and health and conservation. And they support a range of different Indigenous-led organizations and research projects. And so we were able to get some funding from them to do this work. And they've been fantastic to work with. Yeah, hopefully there are more initiatives like this moving forward. But yeah, I'll pass it on maybe to Aaron if you have anything else to add.
Sure, maybe I'll just add that we also received funding from the Government of Canada through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council and SSHRC, for those of you who know it. And I am forever grateful for the kind of research funding that we have in Canada and have access to. And I also am a huge fan of being able to double dip, if you will, with funding, because this kind of funding is able to support not only research in the more conventional sense that we're used to, but it supported the production of this really powerful documentary film that we've all talked about, the potential value of having a film like this to be shared. And it was able to, these grants, this funding was able to directly support and tangibly benefit Batwa communities through the research and film process. And so I am, I guess I would just emphasize the fortune that we had to be able to use this funding in creative ways to make multiple positive impacts with it rather than just a research output, which it's something that I'm exploring more and more. And I think this team really cares deeply about doing in our academic and creative work.
Thanks,
And
Erin. Oh, sorry,
maybe
go ahead, David.
just add one last quick point about the momentum as well. At least locally, we've been able to work with Sylvia's organization to continue that kind of youth-led internship program to disseminate the film. And so that's something that's happening right now, where a number of Batwa youth are hired through this project to help share it, and hopefully that will be sustained more into the future as well. But yeah, passing it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really helpful, and maybe we'll give the last words to David, or sorry, to Didas on this Q&A part of today. Any reflections on the role of film in research, Didas?
Thank you, Sherry. I want to thank the team. I want to thank Abeg and Sylvia and her team. And I want to say that the momentum is going to continue of disseminating this film. And also it is a reminder that as we do research, we should do some documentary. Our team, IPON team, is continuing to do research. And I think we shall adapt this approach of having a documentary in some of these aspects of research so that it captures actual realities on the ground, the voices of the people that we are doing research on, so that we can disseminate this in real terms. So my last word is to thank everyone, the funding agency, University of Alberta, and the whole team, both in Uganda and Canada, for doing this wonderful work. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me in this project. Over to you, Sherry.
Thanks so much, Didas. Great words to end the Q&A on. With that, I'll turn it back over to Erin and David to close us off.
Great. Thank you so much. Not too much more to say than a big thank you to this incredible team who made this possible and to all of you for being here to celebrate the launch of this documentary film project. You heard a little bit about the research that's coming down the line. We talked very briefly about, what role you can all play in sharing this film and more broadly the story that it represents and the importance of Indigenous voices leading projects of this nature. And so we really do encourage you all to take what you learned today and to reflect on it and to use it more broadly as you move through the rest of your day and your week and your year. David, over to you for a couple of last words.
Yeah, just again, thank you everyone for being here, for your interest in this topic as well. And yeah, we hope that you're able to share this with your own networks and continue this kind of overarching goal of supporting Batwa voices to be heard. But otherwise, really appreciate it. And yeah, I guess we'll be in touch. And I guess I should also mention if anyone has any follow-up questions that weren't answered during this time, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to stay in touch as well. Thanks again, everyone.